I'd like to welcome you all to the SDGs in Southeast Asia Current Trends and Future Pathways webinar. This webinar is organized by the Sustainable Development Solutions Network Philippines, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network Southeast Asia, and Sustainable Development Solutions Network Malaysia. As you know, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network is a group of academic institutions and research organizations around the world, which actually have banded together in order to promote the Sustainable Development Goals. We'll begin, but first, before we begin this webinar, let me introduce myself. I am Randy Tuaño. I'm the Dean of the Ateneo School of Government and former National Coordinator of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network Philippines, and I will be your moderator today. Thank you very much for joining us in this important event. Well, as you know, last June 17, the Sustainable Development Report was released during an international conference in Portugal, and this report is entitled Paving the Way to the Pact of the Future. The report, which annually details the progress of the UN member states in meeting the SDGs, is becoming one of the most important reports in the world, thanks to the many specialists that are coming all over the world who have provided significant data and useful insights. These reports, including the SDG Index and the dashboard, has the most relevant and updated information related to the SDGs among the different countries of how they are advancing and how they differentiate from one another. As you know, these Sustainable Development Reports have been produced annually since 2017, and these reports are becoming one of the most reliable reports on the state of SDGs in the world. Today, we have the great opportunity to hear from one of the people directly involved in the writing of the report, one of the team members in the Sustainable Development Solutions Network Secretariat in Paris, Mr. Grayson Fuller, or New York. Grayson is the co-lead writer of the Sustainable Development Report 2024, the lead statistician and manager of the SDG Index, as well as the team working on SDG data and statistics at the SDSN. Grayson will provide information on the framework for measurement of progress in SDGs in the different countries in Southeast Asia, and he will also provide some assessment on how these countries can improve their performance in terms of these goals. We are also joined by our esteemed panel of experts who will provide a variety of perspectives from Southeast Asia on the report, including the following: Mr. Setyo Budiantoro, the manager of the Economic Development Pillar for the National SDG Secretariat of the Ministry of National Development and Planning, Republic of Indonesia. Mr. Budiantoro is an accomplished public policy, sustainable development, innovative financing expert with over a 20-year track record of leading initiatives for equitable and sustainable growth. Mr. Jeremy Lim, data analyst of the SDSN Asia office in Malaysia, which is hosted by Sunway University. Jeremy is working on SDG data visualization and special projects. He previously worked for 5 years at the Jeffrey Sachs Center on Sustainable Development, also at Sunway University, as a research associate, undertaking research on various SDG topics such as energy policy, electoral studies, and Malaysia's indigenous peoples. Our third reactor is Ms. Fithriyyah Iskandar, a medical doctor and environmental youth activist since 2015 from Indonesia. She's actively advocating for the right to safe, clean, healthy, sustainable environment at the regional and international levels. She serves as a member of the regional executive body in Asian Youth Forum and represents them to the Asian Environmental Rights Working Group on behalf of the youth group representative. And last but not the least, Filomeno Sta is currently the coordinator of the Action for Economic Reforms. He's also the co-founder of the AER, a policy research and advocacy group that focuses on macroeconomic issues, specifically linking growth with poverty reduction, equity, and sustainability. Thank you all, Grayson and all our reactors, for joining us today. So Again, for the highlight of this webinar this afternoon, we'll now move on to the first part of our program, the keynote to be given by Grayson. Grayson, can you share your slides and start your presentation?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for that introduction. It's my pleasure to be here today. And I will go ahead and get started by sharing my screen and making sure everybody can see it okay.
Yes, we see it. Thanks. But if you could put it in presenter mode. Okay.
Excellent. All right, so thank you so much, everyone, for inviting me to speak to you here today. So I'm Grayson Fuller, manager of the SDG Index based in the Paris office. And today I wanted to just go over, in this presentation, firstly, just some sort of contextual information about the report. And then I will move on to some of the key messages and novelties of this 2024 edition of our report. So it's the 9th edition of our Sustainable Development Report. And lastly, some sort of specific analysis into the results of the countries within Southeast Asia on the SDG index within our report this year. And then, of course, saving some time at the end for questions for anyone that has any curiosities at the end of the presentation. So just to get some overall very contextual background about the report, why do we do this report? One is that we want to support countries in terms of making policy decisions, so letting them know where they need to invest more into SDGs, what are their biggest priorities, making the SDGs a very specific and concrete thing by providing data and indicators around these objectives. And also to hold countries accountable, because countries have made efforts to engage with Agenda for 2030, and we need to make sure countries are making progress towards meeting that agenda. And then a sort of second pillar we have is to support debates around data availability. So we want to work complementary to data monitoring efforts, both within international organizations as well as NSOs. We want to support debates around new forms of data. So I think some of you might know, but we don't only use administrative data within the SDG index, and we also want to make data widely available to the public. So both to policymakers, but as well as to civil society. So today I won't be going so much into the details of the methodology section, but just to say that the methodology has been statistically audited by the European Commission's Joint Research Center, and it has been peer reviewed, and it's very stable year on year. And that our report, the data section of the report really consists of 3 sections. So we have the SDG index, which you know is comparable rankings and performance across all countries. Then the dashboards, which allows for visual representation of results. And then lastly, the SDG trends. So this gives a sort of indication of whether or not the country is on track or not to meet the goal by 2030, using the latest available time series data. So it's important to say not just where countries are today, but are they going to be on track by 2030, so 5 years from now. And then just last note about how we use our data. So we use, most of the data does indeed come from official statistics. So that includes organizations like the World Bank, the International, the FAO, WHO, but then we also use data from unofficial statistics. So this includes data from peer-reviewed publications as well as NGOs. And these are extremely useful for covering gaps in additional statistics. So for example, we have data from geospatial information systems this year on access to public services within cities. And then also data from peer-reviewed publications to measure spillover effects, or those kind of, let's say, negative effects in countries might have, both in terms of environment and socially, through their trade with other countries. And then here you just see how we also select our indicators for the report. So we want to make sure they're relevant for all country contexts. Obviously, this is a global report. We have to have indicators that make sense for all countries included. We want indicators that are timely, that are statistically valid, and have robust methodologies, that have enough data to be able to cover most countries within the UN system. And then lastly, indicators with very clear policy ramifications. In other words, not indicators that are just descriptive, that describe differences in countries, but where we can clearly set a target and say that all countries should be striving toward that target. And then I also just want to mention that this report, the Sustainable Development Report, is part of the family of reports that we do at SDSN more generally. So we do have, in addition to our global reports, a number of regional and some national editions that look more deeply into the sort of local challenges and use local data. And so, for example, we've done this exercise with Malaysia, where you have an online data visualization. We can see how different subnational entities are doing within the country of Malaysia. And then one last note to say that, so obviously the SDG index, we have, the rankings and the overall score, but all of this sort of composite or aggregated information is really meant to be a springboard and a point of departure into going deeper into more details into the data. So you have overall scores, overall evaluations of the goals, but you also have all of the detailed indicator data available, both within the report and in terms of our online data visualization. So invite all of you to not just top, the overall results, the overall score, but also to look really deeply into your specific countries, what are the different indicators and how are they doing, to really get a sense of what exactly is going on within your different country contexts. Okay, now with that out of the way, so the sort of context throughout the Sustainable Development Report in general, I'll now present some of its general findings within the report this year. So this report, as many of you know, is a special edition that we're doing ahead of the UN Summit of the Future. And so the first chapter is actually a set of recommendations for the UN system that was co-written by all the members of the SDSN Leadership Council. This report also features a new index of countries supports UN-based multilateralism. So also very relevant in the context of the Summit of the Future and global governance. And this indicator we integrate into the SDG index under SDG 17 for global partnerships for the goals. And we also have a chapter this year in the report that looks at long-term pathways towards sustainable agri-food systems. In other words, how can we make sure we feed all the people that we need to in 2050 while making sure to keep intact our forests, biodiversity, and land systems, which I think is also very relevant in the context of Southeast Asia. So I think I'll start just by presenting some general background about this UN Multilateralism Index. So we want to cover essentially countries' respect of the principles of global governance as set out in the UN Charter. And so the way we measure this is by looking at these 6 indicators used on the right. So have countries ratified major UN treaties? Do they generally vote with the majority of countries in the UN General Assembly? Do they participate in UN organizations? Do they stay out of conflict? Do they use unilateral sanctions as opposed to multilateral sanctions? And then lastly, contributions to the UN budget and international solidarity is measured by ODA. And so here I put some of the kind of key results of this index. So what we see is that at the top, we have a lot of small island developing states and some states in Latin America. And then at the very bottom, we have, North Korea, Israel, South Sudan, Somalia, and the United States. And then in terms of Southeast Asian countries, we really do see a spread in performance. So you see we have Malaysia at the top with an extremely high score of 83.1, ranked 25, and then countries going all the way down through the middle until Myanmar at the very end within the region, ranking at 180. And so I think this is interesting because it really shows that in terms of, how countries engage with the UN system and multilateral governance, we have a really big spread within the region, from countries that are really, really involved and obeying these sort of rules of global governance and countries that are far less so engaged in UN-based multilateralism. Another one of the key findings of the report this year is that, of course, the world is not on track to meet any of the SDGs whatsoever. We estimate in the SDG index that about 16 targets, 16% of the targets are on track, with most being stagnating with limited progress and around 20% actually worsening since 2015. And this is, of course, really looking at an overall global level. So, of course, there's differences if you look at specific countries, with some countries more on track and some countries less on track. This is just to give a sort of overall global perspective. And some of the SDGs that we see as really being problematic, where we have, both red and a trend that is not really progressing, are SDGs 2, 11, 14, 15, and 16. So really about sustainable agriculture and food systems, cities, pollution, access to public services within cities, biodiversity, both on land and water, and then SDG 16 on governance, peace, justice, and strong institutions. Here you have before you the results of the SDG index, both the top performing countries and let's say the countries at the bottom of the SDG index. So we see, as normal, we have a lot of European countries at the top of the SDG index. These countries tend to do very well on socioeconomic measures and also sometimes on measures of inequality, so SDG 10 and then SDG 16. And then at the very end, we have countries that tend to be prone to a lot of conflicts. And I think, one of the key messages of the report this year is again that, when we have conflict without peace, there really can be no sort of focus on sustainable development and the SDGs. So it's really prerequisites to meeting our global agenda on the SDGs. This is also one of the major charts of the report this year. It gives both a static and a dynamic perspective. So you can see that across world regions, we do really have a big spread in SDG performance with, let's say, OECD members at the top, and then countries in Oceania and Africa sort of at the bottom. And, this is not to say that OECD members are, perfect on SDGs. These countries still have their challenges, especially when it comes to environmental goals. But because of the social, we have, the region of East and South Asia, which in 2015 was actually below the world average SDG index score, so below this red dotted line. And the East and South Asia score is this blue one right here. And you can actually see that since 2015, this region has actually surpassed the world average in SDG index score and is now actually the region that is progressing the fastest on SDGs since 2015. So I think that's one of the very interesting kind of key takeaways from this chart, in addition to the fact that, in general, in the world, we did see progress on SDGs from 2015 until, let's say, around 2020. And then from 2020 onwards, we have seen, a sort of stagnation or slowdown in SDG progress. And so with that, I will now go into, let's say, a bit more details around how countries are doing within the region, within Southeast Asia. So again, just as in with the multilaterals index, we do have quite a big spread actually in country results. So, there's not sort of a huge clustering necessarily. So we have Thailand at the top with a score of 74.7 all the way down to Myanmar at the bottom with a score of 60.8. Again, underlying, how important it is to have peace, justice, and strong institutions to meet the SDGs. And then also, I think it's interesting to note that, for some of the biggest countries in the region, so Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, these countries do have pretty similar SDG progress, all with the scores above 2/3 of 66%. So these three very, very large countries are all more than 2/3 of the ways to optimal SDG performance. And here we see the SDG dashboard for countries within Southeast Asia. Again, I think it's interesting because we see that there is really a broad range of performance and experiences within different countries. I think maybe the SDGs I would point out here the most is in terms of having a lot of problems would be SDG 2, where we see a lot of red and orange, SDGs 14 and 15 as well, where, given just the fact that this region has so much biodiversity in forests and primary forests, I think these tend to be some of the biggest issues. So sustainable agriculture in terms of SDG 2, and then biodiversity is measured by the different indicators in SDG 14 and 15. And then on some of the other SDGs really use a big range of performance, such as SDG 1 and 4, 11 and 9. We have really all the sort of possible experiences within the SDGs. I think it's interesting, for example, you have SDG 9, where you really see this kind of contrast between Singapore, which is green on SDG, and then other countries like Timor-Leste, which really do, have opportunities for improvement when it comes to this SDG that really looks at long-term growth strategies, innovation, and industry, which are essential for long-term growth. I made this graph right here just to give a sort of dynamic perspective of how countries within the region are doing. You'll see in the dotted lines, I put Malaysia, Indonesia, and Philippines, just some of our big countries that you can see how they're doing. I think one of the key takeaways from this chart is actually that we do see progress essentially in almost all countries within the region. So there's no countries where we really see kind of sliding in the wrong direction or really stagnation, but there's progress really across the region in all three countries. And there is still, let's say, even though there is still sort of spread in performance in 2023, we do see that country scores are closer now than they were in 2010. So, since SDGs have been adopted, there has been some sort of convergence in sustainability and living standards in countries in the region, which I think is a very positive message and a very good sign for Southeast Asia. And then to wrap up, I just wanted to go over a few indicators because obviously it's interesting to look at the goals and the overall SDG index scores, but it's also nice to look at some specific results. Here we have SDG 1, the indicator on poverty 190 a day. So again, you have an interesting spread in performance here, where you have a lot of countries that really don't have any issues with this indicator at all, but then you do have Timor-Leste, which still has sort of major issues when it comes to combating extreme poverty, and also the trend is not so positive. So I think this is one of a really big area for attention for this country. And they also do have some issues sometimes with missing data. So here you see, for example, we are missing some sort of survey data on poverty for some key countries in the region, including Singapore and Cambodia. We're not able to include a sort of SDG analysis, an SDG evaluation for this indicator due to missing data. Then, as I was sort of hinting at before, I think another interesting indicator for this region is looking at deforestation, just because of the preponderance of primary forests. And here you can see, across the board, we do have issues with deforestation. Obviously, some countries less than others. But, across the board, we do see issues with deforestation. However, one of the things I think is really interesting is we do have, we have very big differences in trends since 2015. So for example, Indonesia actually has a positive trend. So deforestation is coming to a halt, or some other countries are actually moving in the wrong direction. And we're seeing more and more deforestation as the years go by since adoption of the SDGs. And here's another indicator that I think is interesting for the region, which is the REDLIS index, that's research survival. So essentially this index measures how well countries are preserving their endemic species and biodiversity within the region. And here again, you see the overall message is not so positive. And yeah, basically all countries have work to do when it comes to preserving biodiversity within their country context in this region. And yeah, just to wrap up the performance, I just want to say that obviously we have our online data visualization where you can check out the different results, indicators, scores for your country, look at trends over time. So please feel free to play with the data and use any of this in any of your work streams. So with that, I thank you so much for your time today, and I'm available for questions around results on the SDG Index in case anyone has any. So thank you so much. I don't, did one of the moderators want to transmit to me any questions, or I don't know if we wanted to go ahead with the next performance.
Okay, thank you, Grayson. Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself, but yeah, thank you again for your presentation, and it's very clear. And I think from your presentation, there are some messages that we in the Southeast Asia must also take into recognition. So one, I think that we've been improving a lot, and you show that in the chart, not showing the progress in terms of SDGs, but there's certain areas of concern. SDG 2, 15, 16 as well. I think to some extent 11 also as well. I think you pointed out the issue also of deforestation is also a big issue. But I know that you're leaving us before the open forum, but maybe you have time for a few to answer a few questions. I think there are a few already in the chat. No? And let me just compile these. Gather these questions, and then maybe you can answer them one by one. So the first question is by Yoram Limbong. He asks, what, given this, no, so what are the main issues, no, that you see in terms of SDGs in the region, which I think you've already also answered, no, that issue of access to food, no, and also deforestation, but maybe there are others also as well. Second, there's also a question by Penny. Unfortunately, she didn't give her last name. There are some countries in Southeast Asia whose incomes seem to be higher, like for example Singapore, but they're ranking much lower compared to other Southeast Asian countries such as Vietnam and Thailand. So can you give a statement about the correlation between achievement in terms of SDGs and the income of and of countries, the average national income of countries. And we have also a question by Lakesh Basirani of the Green Finance. Is there a correlation between trading with Europe? Because I think you've pointed out, is there a correlation between the trade with Europe, or trade of Southeast Asian countries with Europe, to its performance on SDG? So I think this is due to the fact that you said the SDG achievement in Europe is the highest, no? But among regions in the world. So does that mean that countries that trade more with them, at least Southeast Asian countries that trade more with them, would also better perform in terms of SDGs? And then fourth, from Jonathan Kalape, is there any relation between biodiversity and deforestation with poverty, and more specifically the Philippines? I think those are the questions that were asked, in that case in the chat.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you so much for those excellent questions. So I'll try to respond as best as I can to the different questions that our audience has today. So in terms of the main challenges in the region, so yeah, I mean, I think, as I said in the presentation, overall, it's a story of progress, I think, within Southeast Asia, but there are a few SDGs and, let's say, dimensions in the SDGs that I think need, sort of special attention. So that's, of course, everything related to sustainable agriculture and biodiversity preservation, forest preservation, and also pollution for a lot of countries. So within SDG 11, I think that's one of the big areas. In terms of some of the socioeconomic indicators, I think it really depends on the country. You have some countries where, access to clean water, electricity is really no longer an issue, and other countries where that's really far from being the case. But in this case, I would say it's not really a regional issue so much as, kind of a country-specific issue within the region. But if I had to say sort of my regional group them in terms of regional challenges, I would go really with sustainable agriculture, pollution, forestry, and biodiversity protection. So thank you for that question. Then, so a very good question about the relationship between income and SDG index performance, and notably, why does Singapore not perform as well as we think it would, given its income? So I would say, in general, there is a sort of positive relationship between, GDP per capita or income and SDG performance. I mean, we see time and time again that higher income countries do better than lower income countries when it comes to SDGs, because it's easier to invest in clean water and electricity access, public services, hospitals, social protection, even certain environmental protections when you have the fiscal resources to do so. With that being said, not everything obviously is a positive story when it comes to higher income. So especially, CO2 emissions a lot of times tend to go up when countries have more income and consume more. And especially all these sort of, what we call negative spillovers in SDSN, or negative impacts that countries have on their environment or in other countries due to consummation, but that happen overseas. And specifically in the case of Singapore, that's actually what we see. So the country does do well in a lot of domestic measures of SDGs, especially the socioeconomic ones. But because there's just so much trade intensity and so many importing of products that are produced abroad in Singapore, this means that the average Singaporean generates a lot of negative impacts abroad, compared to the average Thai or Filipino. So that's one of the, let's say, key messages of the report, which is that high-end countries really need to make sure that they are not just outsourcing their negative impacts to other countries when they consume a lot. And that explains why Singapore is not higher than we would think it would be based on its level of income. It's a very good question on income and institution performance. Then on, yeah, interesting question. So on trade with Europe, yeah, so that's an interesting question. I'm not sure. So I mean, definitely, I would say European countries, do have some sort of historical legacy of having benefited in the past, and so they have higher incomes today, which explains why they're have higher SDG performance today. In terms of trading with them, I don't know if that per se would necessarily lead to higher SDG performance. Obviously, trade can be a big factor of growth, which can in turn be, help promote SDGs when countries have greater incomes and greater fiscal capacity. But, it's important to trade in a way that's sustainable. So, trading products that are not produced in harmful ways, making sure to avoid illegal logging, making sure that there's good labor standards and living wages. All these things are also very important, to make sure that trade is leading to sustainable outcomes and not sort of degradations of the domestic situation. So, yeah, I would say trade is obviously can be a good motor for growth and sustainable development, but it really depends on how it's done. And then the last question, so about the relationship between biodiversity forests and poverty in the context of the Philippines. So that is a very good question. I mean, there are people that know this subject better to me. So I mean, we do have an assistant, a few different work programs that look at how indigenous people and forestry sectors are kind of working together, and how those two things can be harmonious. Um, I'm not necessarily an expert on that, so maybe I won't give such a specific answer, especially in the case of Philippines. I would say I'm not really qualified to answer that. But I do think, obviously forestry sectors can be an important source of growth when they're done in sustainable ways. But, obviously primary forests are extremely important to protect for biodiversity, for climate, for many reasons. And so, making sure we don't destroy our primary forests in the world, of which Southeast Asia has so many, I think is really one of the key priorities, both for the region, but also just for us, globally as a global sort of priority. So yeah, with that, thank you so much for those very, very good questions. So I'm going to answer some of them a bit better. And thank you again for your time today and for allowing me to present the results of our report.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I can't seem to unmute myself again. But anyway, yeah, thanks again for your responses. And yeah, I agree with you. I mean, so while yeah, I agree, no, especially with your second point on, or the answer to your second question on the relationship between income and SDG performance. So there's a positive relationship, but it's not necessarily perfect. So that's why we see many countries which have higher SDG performance, higher incomes, but not necessarily having the highest SDG performance as well. Anyway, thanks again, Grayson, for your responses. And maybe if there are any participant who would like to ask a question directly to Grayson, or maybe our the actors would like question on the. I don't think we see any participant, but yeah, I think the report I think is yeah, again, maybe you can just inform us about the you said that there are new features in this report. So one looking at support to multilateral the work towards multilateralism. And then there's also a chapter also on sustainable pathways on food. Maybe you can talk a little bit about this, maybe and provide some context, and maybe how do you think, Grayson, would this apply to developing countries such as those in Southeast Asia?
Sure, yeah. So I can give a bit of context about some of the different chapters. So, the first chapter is assistance and recommendations for the UN reforms for the Summit of the Future. Then we have our chapter 3, which is on, how countries are interacting with the multilateral system. And we have our chapter 4 on food and land pathways for sustainable agri-food systems. Yeah, maybe I can just quickly say that I think the chapter on multilateralism is, of course, globally applicable. It's important for all countries to be members of, our multilateral system and UN's institutions and participate in global governance. Of course, there are some countries whose outsized influence in the national arena means they need to be especially attentive to, making sure they apply and engage with the rules-based multilateralism. I think that's one of the key messages of the report. And I think we do see, a big relationship in terms of, how we're able to keep peace and, sustainability on the agenda when we have peace as it relates to participation in multilateral systems. Obviously, one of the reasons we have all these rules for global governance is to make sure we have peace and security within the world. And I think this is one of the biggest prerequisites we have to the SDGs. So it's really important that all countries engage with the UN system in ways that are respectful of each other.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
And yeah, and then secondly, I would just mention some of the other chapter, the food and land chapter. This is actually co-written by some of our colleagues here in the SDSN Secretariat that work on the FAPL team. And so what they do is they gather researchers from different country contexts and they try to see what situation will the world be in 2050 if we, one, continue on our current path. In other words, if we're just in a business as usual scenario. 2, if we adopt policies that countries are currently adopting. So, if countries says we're going to do this, we're going to cut deforestation by this much, what will that give us in 2050? And then a third scenario, which is a global sustainability scenario, in which case countries do the most they can to meet climate targets, sustainability targets, and to stay within the planetary boundaries. And I think the chapter is really interesting because it basically shows that, when it comes to business as usual scenarios, there's extremely very few targets that we're meeting in terms of sustainable agri-food systems. So when it comes to CO2 emissions, forests, and even feeding purple, so solving issues related to undernourishment, There's a lot of global targets that we're not going to meet. But that, if we take very ambitious action, so both in terms of what countries have already committed to, but also what they could commit to, we can actually meet a lot of these targets in terms of sustainable food and land systems, both in terms of feeding people, solving problems of nourishment, preserving biodiversity, having protected areas, and yeah, also making sure we meet essential climate targets, so reduce CO2 emissions, methane emissions, and pollutants. So yeah, I think it's an interesting chapter also because it basically is kind of forward-looking. I think the SDG index is really looking at, what has been the situation since 2015, how are countries at today, and what has the rates of progress been in the past. But we also want to look, forward and say, based on, current policies in place or based on what's happening, where will we be in the future? So I think it's an interesting complement to the SDG index. So we have, kind of critical look at the past, the present, and the future within the report.
Okay, thank you, Grayson, for going through the specific highlights of this report. And again, congratulations to your team. And maybe we can invite others who are more interested in the report to actually go to the website and download the report. And if they're interested in the specific chapters of the report, and that's available in the Sustainable Development Report website.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Grayson, for taking time to be with us today. I think your expertise and perspectives have enriched the understanding also for our participants, and we look forward to applying your insights, the insights of the report in our work moving forward. So thanks a lot. Okay, and now let's go now to the second part at this conjuncture. Let's go now to the second part of our report with a panel discussion. Again, our panelists include Setyo Budiantoro, the manager of the Economic Development Pillar from the National SDG Secretariat of the Ministry of National Development and Planning, Republic of Indonesia. Jeremy Lin, the data analyst from the SDSN Asia office. Fithriyyah Iskandar, Asian Youth Forum representative to ASEAN Environmental Rights Working Group, and Men Santana, the coordinator of Action for Economic Reform. So thank you for being here. So maybe we can start the discussion by asking several questions to the participants in this order. For the first question, for Setyo Budiantoro, from our discussion, what insights actually can you glean from the state of SDGs in your country based on the Sustainable Development Report 2024?
Yeah, thank you, Philip, and also Grayson, of course, for this opportunity, and of course, SDSN and the UID. Can I, before I answer your question, Philip, can I just share a little bit of my presentation?
Sure. Go ahead. Can we give Setyo his co-host privileges so that he can show?
So I can do that. So okay, thank you for the opportunity. Yes. Okay. Now it's working.
Yeah. Are you okay?
Yeah. Okay. Wait a minute. Just make sure that it's already on. Yeah. Okay. So related to the question that you asked, so I would like to give some overview so that we can understand related what has happened in Indonesia, and also related to this one, related to the report of the SDSN. So actually, if we see the, I don't know why I still stop. So as we see actually the presentation from Grayson, that actually the achievement of global SDGs is only 16%. I think we know that this is really a challenge for us, and of course we need some breakthrough related to this, and looking at to the Indonesia now. So from the achievement of the SDS and SDGs index, actually if we see from 2019 until 2024, so actually the trend is better, and then if we compare the last one in 2023 and 2024, so it's decreasing three ranking, this one. But if we see actually the methodology of the SDSN, when I carefully this report, so there is a change in methodology in this calculating the index. So and the comparison, one edition cannot be compared with the result from previous edition. And then also, if only 2 or 3 positions between countries should not be considered significant. So looking to that, this limitation, so we understand because if we see the current situation in Indonesia is quite different, because we see a lot of progress related to that. I will show the data later. And looking to some data also, there are some errors that probably this is because of almost 200 countries. So it is quite difficult to check one by one the data, but related to some data that we see actually, like this one, the data error, like the data related to life expectancy at birth. So this is the report in 2023, and this is the in 2024, and we see in here that the data that life expectancy at birth is decreasing from 71 to 67. But actually, if we see that in Indonesia now is already more than 73 years. So this is what we found in here, and also the update of the data, also the update of the data, and also some error of the number. This one also we see that like prevalence of stuntings in children under 5 years of age. This is we see in here also decreasing, but if we see the number that actually if we see in our statistic is already 21%. So it's a very different number. So that is the data that we found. Some of them have errors, and but even some data have some error and also not so updated. But if we see the this one in a bigger picture, actually there are a lot of achievement that we already have in Indonesia, and in Indonesia actually we does not have any indicators SDG school that are decreasing. So this is good news that all of these goals actually not declining. Some of them, especially in Asia Pacific or in global level, actually in goal mostly in climate action is decreasing. So this is for Indonesia to see that we have a good achievement related to that. And from the SDSN, the survey before 2024 in 2023. So in that report in previous year, so there is a survey that is very important, and this is not in 2024. We don't get it, But from the 74 countries to assess government commitment to SDGs implementation. So Indonesia is among the highest, especially in Asia. So Indonesia in Asia, you see here is the first one because upper this one is mostly from the Europe and Indonesia is number 7 in global level. And related to this one, related to commitment, especially because we are now in Ateneo University, and I would like also to share this one related to the Times Higher Education World University ranking. So from almost 2,000 university of more than 100 country, and this is Indonesia is not bad. Committed related to achieving SDGs, like in UNAIR. UNAIR is a University of Airlangga in East Java, and ranking number 1 related to poverty. This is quite, of course, we proud of this, and also related to the gender equality. So we see that the commitment of achieving SDGs not only from the government, but also from the university level, so and the higher education. So this is quite encouraging for us, and I would like to share again related to that. And this is how Indonesia actually implement SDGs. We mainstreaming SDGs in our national medium-term development planning. We call it by 1K2. So we achieving SDGs, and also we achieving our national development agenda, because actually that is almost the same. And we already have the SDGs roadmap comparison of the achieving of SDGs. What is happen if the business as usual projection, and also the intervention that we have, and also the financing gap, and also financing strategy after the COVID also. So we already have it, and this is the national action plan that we have, and we have also the subnational action plan, more than 32, more related to 32 out of 38 provinces, and we have the MONEC also, the monitoring and evaluation. Related in national level, and also in PNR that also mentioned in the SDSN also, the report. And this is what we achieve actually, what we achieve. So in global level, in SDSN, the achievement of SDGs is only 16%. And if a report from the UN, from the UN ECOSOC is 15%. So Indonesia is 62% is compared to our target. It is quite significant, the difference. And if we read from the Boston Consulting Group, actually, they said that Indonesia is the most progressing of upper middle income countries in achieving SDGs. So we see this the social pillar, economic pillar, environmental pillar, and justice and governance pillar. And this is the indicators. So we have 289 indicators, and this is the indicators that we can track. We can track which indicators that is achieve progressing or requires special attention. That is the red one, and also related to the green one is data unavailable. So we can see in here that 138 indicators, 62% achieve. This is why the green one is there are many green one in here. And what we are doing now, especially this is the question that I would like to answer. So the key factors to achieving SDGs, of course, is enhancing multi-stakeholder partnership in SDGs implementation. So how from the government and parliament, and that is why it is very important to mainstream SDGs in our development planning, in the policy, in regulation. So that is very important. We have the presidential decree of SDGs in Indonesia. And then I would like also to share later on related this one, private sector and philanthropy, how they also align their activities. As we understand, especially in business sector, they have ESG that also contribute to SDGs. And this one from the university. University is very important because become the think tank of the development, and also to support the in local level, especially, and also, of course, NGO and media, because related to media, the dissemination, understanding, awareness, and then to action, I think that is very important. And we see the progress of awareness of SDGs in Indonesia. I see the report is the most advanced one. So I think that is a very good news also. And what is also very important to us, as we understand that our fiscal quite limited, and also we only have time 6 years. So that is why it is very important to see the interlinkages, to see the interconnectedness among the indicators. And then we understand which indicators that is have proximity, has leverage, has multiplier effect to other indicators. Because 289 indicators, of course, is so many. So we need to prioritize that one. And we already also define which indicators that is very strategic, that is have top centrality related to other indicators. And then we see here that mostly is in basic services. And hopefully with this one, we focusing with this one, then we can have more achievement in SDGs. And then this one I already mentioned related to localizing SDGs in sub-national level. 32 provinces already have the SDGs provincial action plan that also include the district and cities. And we have also the SDGs village also, and we now manage the indicator that they contribute to achieving SDGs. So for the SDGs in village level, they should refer their budget to SDGs. That is very important. And this is for the university. In Indonesia, we have 52 SDG centers that is based in university here, and that is why when from the university ranking from the global level, why is Indonesia is quite advanced related to that, because we also facilitate this one, the SDG 52 SDG center based in the universities. And later on related, this is what the mention, the challenge that mentioned by the SDSN report, especially for financing. And then we understand to accelerate SDGs, of course, we need to accelerate also the financing. And we understand that from the government, of course, understanding that in global level, the economy is still slowing down, not so very fast compared before COVID. So, and the tax revenue is also declining. So that is why, including the non-state finances and the non-state finance related to private sector, commercial finance, impact investor, and everything is very important. And we also make a calculation that if we would like to achieve SDGs until 2030, we need $1.7 trillion. So this is the challenge that we have. So that is why we need to synchronize. We need to orchestrate all of the initiatives that we have. So Indonesia, as you can see in there, related to the sustainable finance, if we read the report from the IFC, actually Indonesia is the most advanced country in sustainable finance of emerging economy related to, I think, like 44 emerging economies. And then also we have the sustainable taxonomy. So all of the financial institutions, they should consider this taxonomy if they would like to have loan to the private sectors and also equity and something like that. So they should refer to this, to the sustainable taxonomy. And also related to,
Setyo,
related to,
you can wrap up
yeah.
already because we need also to give
Okay.
opportunities to the
Yeah.
actors.
Okay. So this one is there are many initiatives that we have related to this, and then we try to orchestrate this one, orchestrate all of the stakeholders related to financing and also how we achieve all of the indicators through this one, integrated national financing framework. And this is I would like to share also. So this we have the dashboard. We have the dashboard data that this is quite comprehensive, this one. So if you would like to have the data and also the disaggregation of the data and everything, you can access this one. So that's all my presentation, Philip. Sorry, taking too long time.
Problem, yeah. Thank you very much, Setyo, for giving the context, no, and your reaction to the report. So, and also showing the progress of Indonesia in terms of the SDGs. Let's now go next to our next reactor, and our next reactor will be Men Santa Ana. And also the same question, Men, what insights can you glean from the state of the SDGs in the Philippines based on the report that was given earlier by Grayson? Understand, Men, that you can't open your video, so that's fine. But maybe we can hear your reactions. Men? Well, yeah. Well, I'd like just to ask Setyo just to down the. I mean, can you just the presentation? Can you already? Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Men.
Randy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Randy, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Okay, good. Thank you. There you are. So, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I have to apologize. I am in a remote place in Mindanao, a mountainous area, and internet connection is a little weak. So please bear with me. I cannot turn on the video.
No problem.
But okay. Also, I'd like to thank Budi from Indonesia for his presentation. Budi and I are longtime friends, and it's good to see him again here. Okay, for the Philippines, I would like to start with summarizing some of the points raised by the report. And to be honest, it's somewhat disturbing. The report says that in relation to the status of the SDG targets, 31% of targets relating to the Philippines has been achieved. So that's good, but 31% is still very, very disturbing, about a third only. Limited progress for 39% and worsening situation for about 30% or 39.7% of the targets. Now, the report also says that there are major challenges, and I'd like to focus on 3 areas. They are actually related. The first is in relation to growth. That's the description of the report. Major challenges remain on growth, on equality, and on urban poverty. That is proportion of urban population living in slums. I do understand for example, what Budi said about Indonesia, that there can be a lot of noise regarding the data we have. But we can also triangulate the SDG data with other measurements, other indicators, other targets. And what the SDG has shown in relation to the Philippines is not far off from what even the Philippine government will acknowledge. The fact is we are not achieving our targets or even our medium-term targets. For example, the goal of achieving upper middle income country in a few years might not be attained because government itself has downgraded the growth targets. We cannot achieve the original target of a growth rate of between 6.5 and 7.5, and there's been an adjustment downward. In relation to equality, if we again look at the official data, there is some improvement in equality over time, but still the Gini coefficient remains disturbing, especially if we compare our situation with the rest of Asia. We are one of the worst performing countries in terms of achieving equality. Okay. So I want to focus now on how we can rebound or how we can try to recover, try to meet the SDG targets with attention given to growth, equality, and poverty reduction. Here, it is important to look not only at the GDP growth, but also to look at other variables around for example, we are part of the Human Development Network in the Philippines. And so and the SDG is about adopting that human development approach. And I have, given the time constraint, I have five points to make here. The first is we still recognize the importance of growth. It's still necessary. As I said, the growth in the Philippines is below performance. We can still optimize that growth. But the lesson is the growth that we must have should be inclusive. It should be broadly shared. And that's how growth can serve equity. Some people are saying, well, some economists, in fact, are saying that, well, in the short run, we can tolerate some inequality so long as we have the growth in order to reduce our poverty. Indeed, that happened to some countries, but that is not a sacrosanct view. We also can learn, even from the East Asian miracle, the pioneer East Asian countries that industrialize, that growth and equity can go together. But still, the point there is we need that growth, but make sure that such growth is broadly shared, that such growth is inclusive. And how do we do that? We can learn from previous years in the Philippines. Before the pandemic hit us, and of course the pandemic created a lot of problems for us. Poverty again increased. There was negative growth, and from there we are having a hard time recovering the rate of growth that we achieved before the pandemic. But between 2012 and 2019, before the pandemic hit us, the Philippines averaged a growth rate of 6% and above. That's quite impressive. So during that period, we can learn some lessons. And what are the lessons that we can learn during that period? By the way, it's not only that high growth of 6% and above. It was also at that time, particularly between 2015 and 2018, that poverty incidence sharply declined. And it was also at that time that during that period, those 10 years, that we were able to improve our equality measures in terms of the Gini index. So we had high growth, we had a sharp reduction of poverty, and we had improved equality outcomes. So what can be the lessons learned during that period? 10 years, more or less 10 years. The first is, yes, we have to grow at 6% and above. But the question is, how do you make that equitable? And the lessons that can be learned there, do the hard reforms. but at the same time put in place the social policy that will benefit the poor. Concretely, what happened, if you recall, that growth, that 6% and above growth during the time of Pinoy, as well as during the time of Duterte, never mind the human rights violations under Duterte, but still there was growth then. That growth was accompanied by first tax reforms. If you would recall, during the Aquino administration, there was the sin tax reform, and that sin tax reform resulted in dramatic gains in revenues, which broadened the fiscal space. And it created the momentum leading to more reforms during the Duterte administration, the comprehensive tax reform, the tax on fuel, the income tax relief, the rationalization of fiscal incentives, the broadening of the value-added tax, etc. But it was not only tax reform. We also had some legislation, some measures that made investments, that made the country more friendly to investments. For example, the amendment of the Public Service Act, the easing of importations to increase food supply, at least in the short term, that did help the Philippines lower prices, for example, for rice. There was universal health care. Again, that was very critical, the legislation of universal health care. We had the 4Ps, the cash transfers for the poor, which even expanded. So you had that combination of growth policy and poverty reduction policy, resulting likewise in improving equality outcomes. So we can learn from the past, the not too recent past, even if at this time we are again having problems. So moving forward, what can we do? We adopt the approach taken by, and this being done even by Filipino economists. We do the diagnostics, try to identify what the binding constraints are at this time. This is the Danny Roderick approach of doing the diagnostics and identifying the binding constraints on investments and growth. I just don't have the time to go into the diagnostics, but right now it's clear that part of our problem has something to do with the narrower fiscal space arising from the heavy borrowing, heavy spending during the pandemic. So we need to do fiscal consolidation, but at the same time, we have to keep spending high for infra, for education, for health, etc. That's quite a challenge. So that will require a combination of another round of tax reforms as well as good spending. We have a problem regarding inflation, but and that inflation is mainly driven by high prices of food. There is also a range of a menu of policies there to address that. I just don't have the time to delve into the policies that can bring down food prices. There's the problem of power, etc. But but from there, apart from identifying the binding constraints, we now have to look at the other human development variables. What I mentioned are the interventions that we can do in relation to growth policy, to economic growth. But on human development, the broader human development perspective, let's look at health and education. On health, we see problems right now. For example, the Philippines, a new issue that has emerged relates to the funds from our health insurance program. It is not utilized well. It is underutilized. But now, national government wants to get the money to serve other purposes. That is pretty wrong. But at the same time, we have to account. We have to make the PhilHealth leadership account why it has not been spending that money for the health of Filipinos. But the approach of government is just get that money and use that money for other purposes. So that's going to be a setback for our health outcomes. On education, we are aware of the problem in relation to our performance in the PISA, the international assessment. But a deeper, a closer examination of the PISA result would show something that the reason behind the poor education performance in the Philippines is also a function of our growth and income. The OECD said that around 65% of school performance is associated with income, with the economic performance of the country. So it goes beyond the education system. And that again brings us to the question of a growth policy that will raise incomes and ensure that the distribution of such income will be equitable. And which brings us to what is really good growth. It is about creating good jobs. And this brings me to the last point about designing a different kind of industrial policy that will create the good jobs. But again, that's another long story, which we can discuss later. But these are some of the interventions that we can do to ensure that we have growth that will be very inclusive, resulting in poverty reduction and better equality outcomes. And if we do that, then we can be more confident that we can accelerate the momentum for us to reach our SDG targets.
What are the specific actions that the Philippines can undertake to meet the SDGs and some of the insights that you said about growth and also meeting the SDG targets. Let's now go on another reactor, Fithriyyah Iskandar. Ma'am, can we ask you what are your insights that you can glean from the state of the SDGs in your country based on the Sustainable Development Report? And also, maybe related to that, given the current pandemic and socio-political tensions, what were the outcomes of the report, at least at the global level, that were surprising to you?
Thank you, Mr. Tuano. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity for me to deliver my reactions to the current SDG report that has been delivered just now. And yeah, thank you so much. And I think Mr. Budiantoro already explained very well and very comprehensive on the current status for the Indonesian's result itself. So just wanted to take much time to repeat the same thing again, but yeah, just highlighting my response on the current great progress that Indonesia has been made, because again, although we have a slightly decrease into the number of the score in the rank methodology, but and overall we are Indonesia in that good progress into a positive state to the increased number whether for the rank and the score itself. And yeah, but also, again, we still have several SDGs that still are stagnating. Around 9 out of 17 sustainable development goals still is still in the general good progress, but the rest 8 are stagnating, which yeah, that should be of homework that we are all Indonesians need to do to improve on the SDGs that is still stagnating and the areas that need to be improved. And however, at the regional level, I'm really happy to see that Indonesia is in the 5 top ranks. Yeah, it's really nice to see that. And yeah, talking about the overall progress, I think it's really important to ensure that we are, as the Southeast Asian region, which also one of the most impacted region for the impact of climate crisis. And the current situation, we cannot say that we are in the global warming anymore, but we are in the global boiling. So the challenges for the climate and the environment degradation has become more profound. But again, I'm surprised to see Indonesia is leading into positive progress for the SDG 13. And talking for the more development, we are currently also talking in the development of the Summit of the Future, the ones in the lifetime meeting that we will try to discuss how to enhance the cooperation on critical challenges and addressing the gap in the global governance. And it will also reaffirm the existing commitments such as the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think, leading to the 6 years into the 2030 agenda deadline, we still have good progress that we need to maintain. And I think what we need to improve are the areas that needs more participation, as we know that the jargon that we have is leaving no one behind. So I believe that here I also represent the youth voices, and as part of this mission, that's why I want to echoing what my colleagues always say, that it's important also to improve the youth participation into all aspects of the Sustainable Development Goals, as we know that we are as the future generations that will inherit the current progress, and then the progress, the setbacks, and also trying to engage and then understand on which part that we can take play on. So I think that's my response. Just a quick 5 cents from me. Thank you, Mr. Tuano. I'll give the floor back to you.
Thank you, Fithriyyah. Thank you for your insights now coming also from the youth, about what the need to actually accelerate our commitment to climate change, to progress to stop climate change. So thank you very much. Let's now go on to our next panelist, Jeremy Lim. Also the same question. So, well, the question that we can ask to you is, what are the innovations that are in place now that are needed to keep track of progress that you think?
Thanks very much.
Jeremy?
I hope everybody can hear me. Yeah.
I think you have some slides that you want to present also as well.
Yes. So I think I'll be presenting that. No worries from me.
Go ahead.
Just trying. Yeah. So thanks very much for the opportunity. So I will be presenting a bit about Malaysia's performance, and then I will move on to a bit about the initiatives around dashboards. Yeah. So I think Grayson has already mentioned about the reports that SDSN does annually. And here I speak as both a Malaysian and an employee of SDSN here at the KL office. And I think for the purposes of the audience and the fact that Grayson didn't go into this, great that I left this slide here. So the traffic light system should be understood a bit better if you're looking at the dashboard. It can be very alarming to see a lot of red, but there's good reason for that. And it's globally benchmarked, it's scientifically based wherever possible. And so these indicators are on this scale that is determined based on the performance either of the top 5 performers, if there's no scientific basis, or if there's an absolute basis. For instance, if the goal is 100% school enrollment, then to get green, you need 100% school enrollment. So this is the rough basis before you look at the performance from Malaysia, and maybe just a bit of insight into what you've seen prior from the Indonesian speaker. And this is just a bit more insight about the specifics of what the arrows mean. The arrows are generally used to kind of push countries in the direction of achieving the goals by 2030. And so, if you're not going to achieve it, you're not going to get a green arrow based on the performance and the data that's generated in the global dashboard. So if we look at that, Malaysia is not doing too well. The whole, in general, it has more than 20% of indicators that are worsening, and a good chunk, more than 50%, that is stagnating. In general, Malaysia as a relatively rich country, and within Southeast Asia, the richest big country, these results are less than satisfactory. And so, given what you already know, I'll go into details about the rank and why Malaysia has a long way to go in terms of its performance. So I think the Indonesian speaker did mention that the methodology does change year on year. And so this year, looking in trying to understand Malaysia's performance, we've decided to just backdate the ranking. So we've used the indicators from this year's report and the data that's available on the SDR website. Feel free to go and download it and analyze it yourself. We've shown that Malaysia's ranking has slipped considerably, but has made improvement in recent years. And this is can be seen either in a positive or negative light, because now, compared to 2015, we were 81, now we're 79. Could say that we've made some improvement based on this graph, but that's a bit hard to measure up against where we should be in terms of our performance. And if we compare with our regional neighbors, and in this context, we're talking about Philippines and Indonesia, they've made significantly more progress as middle-income countries within this tier. They've made more than 6%, Indonesia more than 8% in terms of SDG index performance, again, using the 2024 methodology. So something very commendable. And in particular, we're looking at Indonesia because there needed to be a comparison of some kind. And this case study was chosen because we had recently presented it to government officials to help them understand where they could improve and what kind of role models they could be looking at. And so we did a quick comparison with Indonesia. And again, this is rankings. This doesn't take away from what my colleague Grayson had mentioned, the picture that the index performance is going up as a whole within the region. It doesn't take away from that. This is the rankings. And you'll notice in the rankings that Indonesia overtakes us in 2019. This is because of improvements in various SDGs, and I'll go into a bit of detail on that. But in general, their lower base in terms of their weaker performance does help them catch up, but that doesn't fully explain why they've been able to overtake us for so many years. And back to re-emphasizing where Malaysia is at, if you think of the SDG scores, the SDG scores are normalized on a scale of 0 to 100. So if you score 0, it doesn't mean you have a 0 of something, and 100 means you have 100 of something. These scores are normalized, as I showed in the previous slide on unemployment. So even given that context, you can see that Malaysia is not a good student, right? If you see it as a test score out of 100, Malaysia from 2015 to 2023, some of our scores that are below 60 have not really gone anywhere. And so there's massive improvement that needs to be made in some of these areas. So I want to focus in on two particular areas for our performance, just quickly before I get onto the dashboards. So Malaysia has long talked about renewable energy, but Indonesia has made much better progress. It has improved in terms of the rankings. So what I have done was to rank each country from our region by SDG, and Indonesia jumps significantly while Malaysia has slipped, and that is primarily due to others surging ahead. So in many regards, Malaysia is lagging behind. And a large part of this that is quite commendable, again, is the increase in renewable energy share, something that, Malaysia has talked about to no end, but progress has been fairly limited, and there needs to be more urgency about addressing this issue. On expenditure, if you look at the renewable energy production and output, there are clear indicators that there's no anomaly in the data. Other sources of information corroborate this. From renewable energy output as a percentage of total electricity output, and in kilowatt terms as well. Yeah, so this is really to show that Indonesia's hydro production, although it is dominant, that's not the full picture. What you should be looking at on the chart is the solar increase from 65 to 432 in megawatt terms. This is tremendous increase. Along with the row below that, their bioenergy, has seen also a tremendous increase. So these are areas that there's a tremendous opportunity for Malaysia to catch up on, given our resources available, our better access to financial markets compared to Indonesia and Philippines. This is a lost opportunity for Malaysia that we should be catching up on. The next thing to look at is where Malaysia's decline in the rankings is SDG 2, is a heavy contributor to the decline. And in particular, if you look at our prevalence of stunting, wasting, and obesity, if you see the second, third, and fourth row, that is a major contributor to our slip in rankings. And it is sad to see a rich country experience this decline as we have the resources, the government capacity to deal with this. And in particular, we was looking at how other countries, and in particular, in this case, we zoomed into Indonesia, how they addressed it. And so, and again, re-emphasizing this point of how we're underperforming. Indonesia's presidential decree number 72 on stunting reduction seems to have done the trick, and they have been able to track results on this. Sorry about the font being a bit small there, but they have done well in terms of tracking, things like consuming more nutritious food, having more nutritious food available to households, improving the nutrition intake of malnourished toddlers. So all this is to say that, urgency, especially on the part of government, is very much needed to address some of the decline in our SDG score and the stagnation overall. And how we hope to address this is where I will answer the moderator's question, which is to try and monitor SDG performance at the state and district level. So this is for us one of a major project at the KL office, to try and get stakeholders to more actively engage in the SDGs, make it more relevant at the local level. And so, yeah, I'll post the link in the chat after this for anyone who wants to have a look. But we've been able to decompose the performance of this by states. And so you can see here, SDG by SDG, each of them will be ranked based on the methodology of giving those traffic light scores. We analyze and standardize the thresholds for each of these, in some cases to a global standard. And when a global standard is not available, we will try and find a local standard for what is an appropriate target to be given a green and a red. So this is the Malaysia's performance on SDG 1. Of course, if you go to the global result, we score green because that is an indicator that is reserved for middle-income countries. But if we use the national poverty line, which luckily for us, it was revised in 2019 to accurately reflect the realities of Malaysia, you can see that there's poverty even in the richest state. On the bottom left, Selangor, you can see that state is red because there are many urban poor very close to the capital that surround the capital that is in orange. That's in yellow. So we are trying our best to have these indicators be relevant to policymakers and to try and reflect the reality of the SDG performance in each and every state. And this is just one example. So we go above and beyond the indicators that is used in the SDR because our local statistics department does have more indicators, and we try and match them to the global SDG targets. If you take the SDR and you compare it against the 169 targets and the 200 over indicators, you'll see that the SDR doesn't have a one-to-one match because global databases are often incomplete or they do not have the indicators. It's an aspirational goal that one day, hopefully we can develop, the UN statistic bodies can develop the capacity to have more of these targets. But for Malaysia, where we do have them, we try to list them so that it gives you an accurate picture. So we have things like the urban-rural divide, number of people directly affected by disasters. So things like these are included in our SDG 1 assessments. And so the last thing I'll present before I hand it back to the moderator is our attempt at district level dashboard. So our statistics department in Malaysia does publish district level data, albeit quite limited. So we are, for this district level assessment, we're only looking at about 19 indicators across 10 SDGs. But I think this is a good start to get people talking. And recently we've had engagement with district officers. And so it was interesting to interact with them and see, how this dashboard can be relevant to their work in trying to get a relative picture of how they are doing compared to their neighboring district. So whatever data we can find from the statistics department, we are putting it on ArcGIS-based map for them to interact with. If you interact with this map, it could be a bit slow, but we're hoping to fix that in the coming months and years. But in the meantime, this tool does allow for very detailed, comparisons if you're looking for a score. So we normalize the score. We will be looking at including the value. So, this district of Petaling scores 94.5, but that means that the absolute score is quite low. So having that actual number will be included as well, because I think that will be more relevant to policymakers. So these are some of the tools that we are developing, interacting with policymakers at all levels to try and understand what their needs are in terms of understanding the SDGs. And I think more than anything, we're hoping to spur friendly competition. If a chief minister of a certain state sees that dashboard and is not happy with his state's performance and sees another state doing well, it will spark, hopefully, some urgency to deal with certain things. Same would go for districts as well. So this is what we hope to achieve. And this is, our humble innovation in terms of getting the SDGs moving at a local level. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy, for your presentation. So great that you had the 2 points, I think, at least for me. One, looking at what is how did Malaysia fare in terms of other countries in the Southeast Asian region, compared the results of your SDG achievement with Indonesia, and also your project in trying to localize, trying to assess the achievement in terms of SDGs in the context of your country in Malaysia. So thanks a lot for showcasing your work in this area. We still have time for a few more comments for our reactors, but before we open the floor for an open forum. So I'd like to ask a few questions for some of the reactors, and I would like to ask this question to Fithriyyah on what is the role of the youth in ASEAN to promote the SDG. So we have been discussing the progress, and at least earlier you also said that it's important that the youth also be involved in terms of trying to address the issue of climate change. But maybe you have some more insights with regards to the role of the youth in trying to move forward, at least here in the region. So
sure. Thank you, Mr. Tuano. So this is very important discourse that we need to also highlight how from the regional and also international level, all of the agencies trying to promote the meaningful youth engagements. So I always say that youth can take place for their contribution in the downstream and then upstream level. What is at the downstream level? The downstream level means that those youth who work at the grassroots and then the organizations or any movements that working towards for achieving the sustainable development goals together with the governments and the agencies. And those who are in the upstream levels are youth that engage in the policy making discussions, in the policy governance. So reflecting for my current active participation as the working group members or in the ASEAN Environmental Rights Working Group, we just concluded our mandate to create ASEAN Declaration to the right of a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environments. So this is the first engagement for youth to be involved as the official working group members for the policy making discussions, just the beginning of the process and until the end of the process. And definitely we are as the youth representative, the only youth representative in ASEAN. We have this responsibility to also extend the opportunity for youth to be participated by giving their inputs through the consultations. And this kind of dynamic that I think it's really important to highlight, because most of the time, sometimes it's really hard for youth to take place, although in the downstream or the upstream level. So that's why promoting the meaningful youth engagement is not something that we need to do at the upstream level, by opening the opportunity for youth to involve in the discussion in the decision making, but also how can we provide these avenues, and then facilitating also providing technical until the financial assistance to the youth that working at the grassroots levels. It's really important, because again, for these two roles, for the upstream and the downstream roles, they should be harmonized to each other. So what the downstream youth that has been doing, it will be supported by youth at the upstream level through making the policy reforms, and then supporting what they can also do to amplify the words. And in ASEAN itself, we have developed the ASEAN Work Plan on Youth 2021 until 2025, which highlighting the 5 priorities for youth to be empowered. One of them is the education, and the other like the health and well-being, also employment and opportunity. The 4 is participation and engagement, which highlighting the important for youth participation in the policy governance, and then the last one, how to promote the ASEAN awareness, values, and identity. But on top of that, definitely we are talking about the sustainable development goals that, as I mentioned, it's really important to also recognize youth participation in there, because their active engagement in the process of the Sustainable Development Goals efforts will create an inclusive and also reflect the diverse needs of the entire populations. And also involving youth in the decision-making process will help to foster a sense of ownership and responsibility towards the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And all in all, the 2030 agenda will recognize the transformative role that youth can play in driving progress, and their participation is a testament of countries' commitment to this ambitious global plan. So yeah, at the international level, we already see there are a lot of open spaces for youth to be participate, especially in the Conference of Parties, which held under UNFCCC or other UN agencies, and there are more avenues for youth to engage, whether in policy making discussion on the side events, and reflecting to also my
Maybe we can
experience.
go. Sorry.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
sorry. Just to give time to sorry.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Yeah.
okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
The message that you said actually was clear now about how the youth really should participate, no, in especially at the ASEAN level. Let's now go to men. Maybe men, very quickly. Can you share any innovative solutions or best practices that maybe civil society groups or maybe local governments that have they have undertaken to try to move forward on SDG progress? Maybe just 1 or 2.
Yes, it's good that you brought up the question of innovation involving local governments and civil society. And in the Philippines, it becomes all the more relevant in a situation where at this time it's so difficult to put in place reforms at the national level. But surely at the local government level, we find the innovations. I can give examples in relation to universal healthcare. We can see several provinces, for example, in La Union, in Eastern Visayas, like Leyte, in Bataan, in Bukidnon, where innovations are being done or in Sorsogon. In other words, I can name numerous provinces that are moving forward universal healthcare. And these are not difficult reforms, like putting in place service delivery networks, putting in place digital systems for health system. And in the end, all these initiatives do help achieve broader sustainable development goals. As we all know, an improvement in health outcome will lead to more productive people, healthier people, and that helps people become fully employed and therefore get more income. So you can see that kind of relationship. And there are also spillover effects. Take the case of having digital information that will likewise involve getting telcos, internet companies to participate in the effort. The spillover there is not only for giving, not only for having internet services, internet communications for the clinics and health facilities, but even for the whole network, including communities. There you are.
Yeah, thank you, man. I think that's a very important need to highlight really innovations, including innovations in ICT that can also improve the delivery of social services. And let's go now to Budi. Your one question that also comes up is, given the progress that the different ASEAN countries have made in terms of SDGs, how do you now, how do you think, and you said that in Indonesia that there are innovations in financing, in localization. What other things do you think are very important in the context of Southeast Asia so that we can really move forward on the SDGs?
Yeah,
Budi?
okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Philip. Man, nice to meet you again here. Long time no see. Okay, I would like to answer related to the innovative financing that is really mentioned by the SDSN report and shows the important thing of to global financial architecture that should be reformed. So I think that is a very important thing. And related to the innovation that we have, actually, if we see the global level, so in global level, of course, I'm not still measured related to Southeast Asia related to this, but if in global level, the needs of achieving SDGs in a year, the calculation we need about $4 trillion around that. And if we see the assets from the financial institutions, from the banks, from the hedge fund, from the fund manager and everything in global level, so almost $400 trillion. So it means that if we allocate around 1.2% of the financial assets of global level, so actually we can do the achievement of SDGs. So that is within in our reach. But how related to involving the commercial sectors, that the commercial finance, that they can also involve in the impact investing. So we need to have innovative approach that we understand, that is in nowadays we call it blended financing. So the blended financing is invite the concessional finance from the philanthropy, especially from the philanthropy sectors, angel investors, impact investors, to involve this one, and then blend it with the commercial finance. So to reduce the risk, to the risking, and also to reduce the cost of financing. So that is involvement. So we can fill the financing gap of achieving of SDGs. And then now the innovation in Indonesia. What is quite surprising for me, we see the philanthropy outlook that we have it. So just last Monday, actually last week, last Monday, and the philanthropy outlook in Indonesia said that 89% of the philanthropy sector, they already concerned with SDGs. So this is quite surprising. Because previously, usually in the philanthropy sector, they much more in charity and also in education and also in health. But now it's broader from that. So it's very interesting. And Indonesia, according to the Charities Aid Foundation, considered as the most generous country in the world. So in the consecutively 5 years. We consider that. And so now how we upgrade, how we transform this perspective from the philanthropy sector to also involving the commercial finance, so that it will give a bigger impact. And we have some examples actually, like in Jambi. So this is much more in co-financing. So in Jambi, that is one of the province in Indonesia. So for villages right there, they don't have electricity. So around 4,000 people can get electricity from our state-owned electric company, and then they supported by the Basnas. Basnas is the Zakat institution. So that is a philanthropic finance from the Islamic perspective, Zakat, and then from the UNDP and also from the banks in Jambi. And then it can help them to provide the electricity. So it means that if we have make something like that, I think we can have some progress. Sorry for too long. Thank you.
Yeah, that's okay. So you really raised the importance really of in finance, no, investing, and the role of philanthropy. And yeah, as I say, you said impact investing is important, no, to make sure that these services, no, the SDGs, no, are accessed, no, by the local populace. No? Okay, so I get now. Let's go now to the open forum. I guess there have been many questions already raised. Very interesting presentations. Thanks again to all our the actors, no, Budi, Men, Fithriyyah, and also Jeremy, for all your for the points that you have raised. No, one question that actually has been put in the chat, no, is the relation between SDG and World Bank's voice and accountability and link to politics. So how do you think, maybe in your respective countries, so this is not directed towards a particular reactor, but maybe any one of you can answer. So how do you see SDGs link to the different indicators related to political participation? And how do you see policymakers, for example, become more? How can they become more aware, you know, of the SDGs? And do you see that actually in the political party platforms, no, in your respective countries? So I don't know, Budi, you want to take a crack at the answer?
Yeah. So in our experience, especially before COVID, so it's like 3 years, 3 years or 4 years, we host the World Sustainable Parliament Forum, something like that. So that is a hosting of the parliament members of 60 countries at the time, around 64, 62, something like that. How that the political party, especially for the parliament member, they involved to SDGs, and also from our research, also it was when I involved very much with men at the time. So we made meta research related to perspective of parliament members related to their views of green economy and also sustainable economy, something like that. And then it is at the time their views, it seems much more conservative. So they are afraid that if we do the green economy, then poverty will have problems because unemployment will happen. So it's sacrifice the economy. But now it's different. Now it's different, and also we also support the green the Green Caucus and related to that to facilitate the parliament members to also involve with in the broader levels, and we also the interparliamentary forum in related to sustainable development. So I think what we need to have is to facilitate this one to the global level, also to the global level. So to understand that many parliament members they concern to this one, and from our perspective also related to the experience of which has finished the election, the presidential election. Most of the campaign, many of them already concerned about this. So it's quite surprising that now it's become the issue has become much more convergence to us. That is our experience in Indonesia. Thank you. Sorry,
Thank you
Philip.
very much. That's very
Tula.
good.
Yeah.
Fithriyyah, in the also is that how you see it in Indonesia also as well?
Yeah, thank you so much. So from my experience, as I see, like maybe the environmental issues not really mainstream in the political manifesto in most of the parties, political parties in Indonesia, because I think yeah, it still needs to be encouraged more for those political parties who are like okay going to the election like next 5 years, because we have just concluded our elections. So it's like pushing the social issues, not only covering, the educations and then social, but not to mention it's not important, but considering that environmental issues also one of the important aspects. And as far as I know, I have one colleague that also work in the Green Party Indonesia or Partai Hijau Indonesia. So they are working most on the social justice and the environmental issues. So we have this one of the role model for the political parties that has shown their commitment since 2012. So I think this should be mainstreamed more into the national stage, that okay, we have these political parties that wants to create the change through the environmental issues. So like the environmental issues, not only talking about SDG 13, but consists from 12 until 15, which interlinkage to each other. Basically, all of the SDGs interlinkage to each other. So yeah, that's my perspective. Thank you so much.
Jeremy, how do you see it in Malaysia? So do you see more and more the link between SDGs and voice and accountability, and how does the political situation become more acceptable to SDGs? So,
I think the adoption of SDGs is primarily happening in the higher corporate sphere, meaning the conglomerates, the MNCs, and in academia. I'm not sure if as well as parts of civil society that are tied to international grants. In general, the discourse hasn't really come into politics. It's only come into politics if you are the minister in charge of the SDGs. And in general, the SDG roadmap for Malaysia is set to be published very soon, but there is a lack of communications. Many people still think the SDGs are about the environment and solely about the environment. The only time it comes up in other discussions is when we are blocked for selling palm oil to the EU, and that has to do with labor conditions. So in general, education on the SDGs still have a long way to go in Malaysia. I commend the colleagues in Indonesia who have done better if their political parties have adopted it to their manifesto. I have not seen similar things on social issues in regards to the SDGs. And clearly, not many political parties, maybe none, have put stunting or wasting on the agenda for theirs. So there are significant gaps that you have to decide. Do you want to educate the public on it, or does the government want to push ahead with the urgency to address such issues? Because by the time you educate the entire Malaysian public issue of stunting, by then the problem could be much worse. So, is it a matter of taking leadership, getting ahead of what the public wants, or is localizing it even possible for some of these initiatives? Again, if you look at the issue of stunting, and again, because I've deep dived into this, I understand that the president of Indonesia recently launched initiative to have school meals with massive pushback from the financial press. And that is commendable that he wants to go ahead with it, because in Malaysia, we tested it poorly and then we retracted it. And the implications of that school feeding program would have been tremendous, because other countries use that kind of school feeding program to teach kids about what a nutritious meal looks like, what they could ask from their parents if they're not getting a nutritious meal. You know, there are examples like Japan that some of my colleagues at my office have deep dived into and looked into exactly how a school feeding program could be central to addressing issues within SDG 2. So there's a long way to go with or without accountability.
Thank you. Okay, ma'am, I don't know, maybe also in the Philippines, so how do you see the SDGs playing out as we come closer to the midterm elections, and maybe also some last words from.
Brady?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to take off from the example given by the Malaysian colleague. And that I think that one way to move forward and make SDG more relevant to voters and to the public in general is to really break it down into digestible issues. Let's take education. Let's start with education. It's an issue that is very concrete, something very felt by the people. The people are aware, the public is aware that we are performing very poorly as measured by PISA and other indices. Now, what's the problem there? As well, one issue some is what is similar to what's happening in Malaysia. The problem of stunting and wasting. If you have stunted, wasted children, they cannot perform well in reading, in math, and in science, etc. So it's an issue now that you can relate to health. So there's that relationship between education and health. And obviously, the undernourishment of children has something to do with their poverty. And that leads us to what poverty reduction and growth strategies are necessary. So there's a way to link the different SDG variables for people to appreciate the relationship, the link between different indicators. But we have to begin with something that is concrete, like that problem in relation to education, which you can link to undernutrition and then to poverty and jobs and growth.
Yeah, so thank you very much, man. And that's, I think, more digestible also for not only for the politicians, but also for the voters also as well. So again, thank you very much for all the points made by our reactors, and I think the discussion here is very rich. There's some commonalities across countries in the region, but also certainly some differences in how we look at SDGs also as well. So again, thank you for the panelists for your wisdom and generously sharing your expertise with us today. Your insights and experience have truly broadened our understanding of sustainability and offered fresh perspectives that inspired us all. And therefore, to conclude our webinar, we'd like to just share a few things with you. First, you all have access to the social media by capturing the QR codes. So we'll show you some of the QR codes for SDSN Philippines, SDSN Southeast Asia, and SDSN Malaysia. So you have used this, please, to access all our social media events that will also be happening in the next few months, and also for the materials also in this webinar. And also by following the QR code of these different SDSN groups, you have access to the form that needs to be filled out to receive your certificate of attendance. So please, you might want to also see the link to these different QR codes. So the SDG in Asia. So please fill that out so that you can receive your certificate of attendance. And then lastly, of course, let's capture all this moment together, and maybe can we invite all of you to put on the video so that we can have a group photo. Okay, so can I ask someone to take the photo? Who's taking the
Yeah,
photo?
sure, Andy. I will capture the.
Thank you, Alex. So just let us know when you've taken all the
Yeah, so,
photos.
all right. So everyone, please kindly open the camera and hold your smile. We're going from the first slide. 1, 2, 3. Hold your smile still. Second slide. 1, 2, 3. The third one. 1, 2, 3. And then the fourth one. Hold your smile. 1, 2, 3. All right. Last slide. All right. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Give it back to you, Randy. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Again, thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Thank you to all our reactors, and thank you for staying, even if we went a little bit over time. We weren't able to answer all your questions, but the organizers will give the questions to the different reactors, and hopefully they'll be able to respond to your questions soon. Again, thank you so much for attending. We hope that you enjoyed this webinar organized by SDSN Philippines, Southeast Asia, and Malaysia. We want to extend our deepest gratitude for your presence here today. Again, I'm Randy Tuanyo. I'm the Dean of the Ateneo School of Government and also former SDSN National Coordinator in the Philippines. So I'd like to thank you again for joining us this afternoon. We hope to see you again on our future events.
See you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.